Welcome, guys. So, could you raise a hand who likes grapes? Grapes. Excellent, excellent. So I don't know if you've on flying on your way here to Seattle, you probably flew over Port of Seattle, and you've seen their huge containers with the name Maersk on top of them. So if you go now to any supermarket here in Seattle, and you try to find grapes from the United States, there's none because it's not a season. All grapes that you can buy here are actually from Chile. And all of them, well, not all of them, but most of them came here in containers similar to the ones that Maersk produces. So in some sense, it's a very example of an extremely global economy, an extremely global customer that produces, that has manufacturing sites all around the world, that connects the whole world together. And the system they're using right now is Dynamics 365 for operations. If they can succeed in using such system on such global scale, and probably every other customer can succeed as well. Of course, it's not easy. The road there to get them into successful state was a long one. And today we're going to share all the technical learnings that we learn while working on this project. Hopefully, the same learnings can apply to your projects and can help build successful implementation for your customer as well. So with me today, Matt, please introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Matt from Columbus. I'm the technical manager of the infrastructure solutions in Columbus. And what we do is that we translate all the technical stuff for the business, so the business can understand what is applicable for them, as well as what needs to be done during their implementation. So that is my main task on this project, to map all the Microsoft technology to actually being able to serve the user and the customer on behalf on these technology stack. So this is me. I have a team in Denmark which is working on Dynamics 365. We have been in the TAB program for a long time. So maybe you should switch off your mic. It's doing the echo. So that is what we do. We've been in the TAB program with Maersk and have learned a lot. So we have tried to take off all the TAB issues because they do not exist anymore, because the product has been improved so much. So what we will present for you here is actually what will impact you when you start these kind of implementations, and map it to something that we know, which is relating to the 2012 and 2009 implementations that we did in the past. So this is me. So hello.
Cool. And my name is Kirill Val. I'm a technical solution architect working for Microsoft. So I'm going to be providing Microsoft part of the story, what's Microsoft vision on end-to-end implementation, each part of the technical implementation. And Matt's gonna provide a real story, how actually we did real implementation and what are the pitfalls and what are the learnings from a real customer implementation using MCI as an example. So.
And what we want to highlight here is why this is important for your project, because what we keep seeing also at this tech conference is a lot of technology is thrown into the loop to make this implementation works. And what we will try to do in this presentation, show you exactly what we did to take advantage of all the new technology to be able to adapt the new product, but as well also select what is needed and what is not needed. So this is the approach. So it will be a kind of a Q&A based on all the slides. So if you have any questions during the slides, you can ask them. Especially, I think there will be something around in relation to the build and the release of code and the whole ecosystem about the ALM. And we can definitely answer that question. And as Kirill is saying, we really want to have the Microsoft approach and also what the partner did to use that technology. So that is our take on this session. We hope you really like it. So yes. So this is the options, the outcomes, and the pitfalls that we are looking at here. Yes. We have these agenda. What we will do at the first is the MCI project overview. We'll tell you a little about the project. You have seen it before. We are happy to have Jacob here, which is actually the customer. He's seated at the third floor at the table here. And he will do a little presentation about Maersk, just to let you know what we do with the MCI Container Industries application. Then we will talk a little about the design and data centers, how we did design the application and select the data center. Then we will talk a little about the environmental strategy. Which environment should you have? How many should you have? And how should you do with these? Then we will talk a little about the solution development, as well as the ISVs. And we're also happy to have Petur from To Increase here as well, because he's one of the major ISVs on the product. And we want to talk a little about that and how to intake their code and how to manage that in the code base of Dynamics 365 operations. Yes, then of course we'll talk about the deployment, how we did the deployment, because that's also totally new in relation to what we did in 2012. And then we have a small about the BI story, because that's deserve some words as well. And then we have the support and troubleshooting, because we have a new scenario here where we do not have access for the production system. So what did we do to accommodate the user need and the debugging needs of a project of this size? Yes? So maybe we should introduce Jacob. Jacob wants to do a small presentation of the...
Just a small pitch.
Yep, small pitch. I think you have the old-fashioned mic here.
The old-fashioned mic's me. That's me.
Hello. Hi. I'm Jacob. Just a small introduction about MCI. We are a small container producer in the world. Actually, most containers are produced in China by a couple of very, very large producers. We are slightly smaller. Within dry cargo containers, we are a fraction of the world market. Within reefer containers, we hold approximately 20% of the world market. But one of our products is an integrated front, and we're the only one in the world that makes this kind of container. We're producing containers in 3 different locations in the world, 2 in China and 1 in Chile. Reefer container in a reefer factory in China and in Chile, and then a dry cargo container in China. These numbers up there really does not say much, but you can imagine a 40-foot containers. I think you've all seen them on trucks. And if you take the Qingdao factory, the first one here, 50,000 boxes a year, that's actually at full capacity. We are running at full capacity right now. It's high season for producing boxes. And we have one of these boxes coming out of the main line every 9 minutes. If we take the 100,000 dry cargo containers in Dongguan, that's also full capacity, and we're also running that at the moment, like crazy actually. Probably also beyond full capacity. That's actually every 3 minutes you will have a 40-foot container coming out of the main line. That's quite impressive to look at. It's quite a lot of steel. And what is even more impressive, maybe, without kidnapping your session, guys, it's a reefer container is actually 1,000 components. So we may not think that when we see it on the street here, but it's actually 1,000 components that are all assembled through approximately 150 manufacturing orders on a daily basis that we report back. So then besides these manufacturing sites, we run sales, engineering, and after sales out of Denmark. Maybe you saw the map in the session we had yesterday, or you're going to show it in a minute. Yeah. All orders for after sales comes in through an e-commerce platform that are live integrated to X. Approximately 5,000 orders a month, 15,000 order lines. We have 5,000 employees. At the moment, we are at 550 users. I believe this will be our end target, which is actually one of our key successes. Is we've grown from 300 users in the old ERP system to 650 users in the new. And while many will say, that's not good because we have to pay more licenses, for me it's good because that means I'm killing Excel and I'm killing all kinds of other subsystems that we have been using before to cater for processes outside the ERP system. So this is actually one of our key successes. Boxes, we don't have that many customers. We have 40. Maersk is predominantly our largest customer. They buy all our dry cargo boxes and they buy 85% of the cooling boxes. Other customers is Seatrade, SAF Marine, Dole are buying specialized boxes for transporting fruit, of course. We are servicing all of these boxes. That's also an interesting story. A cooling, a reefer container only makes 3 to 4 journeys a year. And in the meanwhile, between these 3 and 4 journeys, it's parked in a service depot somewhere in the world, where it always undergoes a standard industry test, which is called a PDI test. I don't remember what it stands for. And when they do this test, they may detect that something is faulty. And then the service depot can open up first of all, look in the e-commerce platform whether this is under warranty. This will be looked up in our Act platform. If it's under warranty, of course, we will replace it free of charge. the whatever component is faulty. If it's not under warranty, they can order a new one. And these will all be supplied from these 7 global distribution centers, depending on which one is the closest to the service depot. And all invoices for this goes out through the center of Denmark. The 7 global distribution centers are working in our Axe and with mobile devices connected to us. So basically we have moved them on board our platform rather than integrated to their whatever IT system they may have been using in the past, which I think is also a very, very interesting move. Although it's a move I probably did not see that made us even more vulnerable to downtime in terms of service windows, because where we may not be fully global because we are so few sites, we could be able to find some service windows in the weekends where we were not working. Suddenly our distribution centers that stretches from New Zealand to Los Angeles, they are always on 24/7. So suddenly the pain has been for us to find a service window where we are not disturbing them and not about us. That's also an interesting learning. So I think that was enough. Otherwise I kidnapped the rest of your session. Last comment maybe. From a management perspective, one of our, and you may not like to hear this, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway. What we want from Dynamics 365 is we want it in a browser, and we do not want to know what's going on behind that one. So we have really been wanting to get rid of in-house technology. That has been one of our core wishes from start, from a business perspective. Why? 5,000 employees, it sounds like a lot, but we're actually a small company. We may turn over $700-800 million per year, but in terms of size, in terms of IT as part of the business, we are so small. So if we were to run this kind of IT in-house, it would mean that I would have to stretch the technologies across our technicians, several technologies per technician. They would never be specialized. We are placed in the outskirts of the world. So me attracting the right talent to do this, and then also keeping up with the knowledge of this, we don't want to do that anymore. Okay. So one of my moves here, and I am actually the browser, I don't want to know about what they do. I have felt it hard in the project here, and luckily they have managed to restore service fast when it has happened, but really I would have preferred not to know these guys along in the project. But it's going to be interesting to hear how you actually dealt with all these things throughout our project. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Yes, and on that story, that was what we were looking into when we onboarded this project. That was exactly the same pitch that Jacob did to us in Columbus, and to increase on all the other partners involved in this project. So we had a lot to do. We were on a TAP program. We were on a platform that was not all done. And what we will show you here is how we managed to do this and actually be a successful implementation. So first of all, the project team here. The customer who was represented by Jacob has just been on the stage. Then we have Columbus. This is me, and this is some of the other guys from Columbus. I have the technical responsibility, but we have Ulrik sitting next at the table in front here, which has the functional solution. Then we have the ISVs, which is STJ, Chewing Grease, and Proactive. And on localization, we have Alpha people to do the Chile localization path. So this is the project, and as you heard from Jacob, he do not want to care about us. So this is where the partner is so important, that we have all the skill sets to ensure that he knows nothing about us, because then we are successful. So we just want to deliver him a production or test system without any interference. So this is the translation from a partner being the technicians that the customer actually probably may own over time or interact with. We have transitioned in that way to deliver a service, truly to this Microsoft analogy about software as a service for Dynamics. But we are not wasting our skill sets here, because a lot of things need to be done by technicians, and we just also need to ensure that the customer is not seeing that. So, yeah. The first problem was that we need to find out if this product could be a single instance, because that was really what we want to have for an AX implementation. I cannot imagine a project where I will not have a single implementation. So we started doing some maps here, and this is the MCI map. And what we see is that we do have, as Jacob said, the factory sites located in China and in Chile. We do also have the service center and research and development in Tinglev. And what we started out here was where to place the data center. So we did a lot of analysis on how much impact can the client handle. We know from the old version of AX that 5 milliseconds was the most acceptable, the highest value acceptable. Mainly we placed the client on top of the AOS to ensure that we have no latency issues. But because we have done a lot of changes to the framework, or Microsoft has done that, we tried to push that framework to see how much it can take of latency and packet loss. And based on that analysis, we actually find out that the East US data center is the best accommodated data center for Maersk, based on the location of Chile. So we have the Danish company and the Chinese company working out of an instance placed in the East US. And how did we do that? Microsoft has provided this Asia speed test, so you can go for this webpage and test from your location to see where they mean you should place your data center. But what we also do was that we tried to make the worst possible scenarios for this client experience, meaning that we actually had a functional architect sitting in a cab in China on a driver's 4G phone hotspot doing Dynamics 365. We had around 350 milliseconds and a lot of packet loss, but actually it was quite a kind of good experience. So what we also did, that was the emotional test. We also did a lot of numbers analytics on this one. And what we found out was actually that 400 and all up to 500 milliseconds with 3% packet loss was acceptable for that client. And that's just tell you about the framework, that we actually have done a lot of the stuff on the client experience by moving it to a browser. Then we also had the consideration about where to place data. If there was any requirements locally from, we need to, of course, take that into accommodation as well. And as I talked before, the performance and latency consideration as well. So what we did find out was that from the site in China, we had some issues, not only by AX, but being at the site because the internet supplier did not have the most or the best, probably the best you can buy. But we had issues with latency from that one. That related to the Skype connectivity, but as well for the AX connectivity. So what MCI did was that they purchased an express route. So they actually had an express route delivered and installed directly on their site. And of course, that solved all the problems. So we have not seen any internet ISP-related problems after we introduced the express route. What we will advise a customer to do is that, of course, express route is expensive. And if you purchase one, yes, you will have all the problems solved. But many customers do not want to take that investment into express routes. So what we do see other partners do is that they purchase an express route and then deliver that as a service. So you do not need to implement the express route yourself. You can just purchase that as a service and get your share based on what you pay for it. So this is actually what we are going to recommend customers. But because the Chinese company had a hard time doing Skype, they purchased themselves to ensure that the project will not have a standstill. Yes?
Can I add something?
Yeah.
I was asked yesterday, actually. So are you going to do something about this when we can actually, let's say, do a hybrid deployment or something like that? Are you going to do something about this? And actually not. We pay around $20,000 a month for this. And if I work that out in terms of money, I'm not even sure that a switch would make sense for us because I would have to get then employ somebody to be able to take care of a hybrid solution. So I don't think we're going to change that. Further, the express route gave us another thing, which I probably didn't see from here. It actually gave us the possibility to use Skype for Business, which we did not have in China before, because we could not work with Skype for Business out of our ordinary internet connections. So we had no connectivity between the sites. Now we have Skype for Business. Now we have these nice Microsoft, whatever they call service somethings on the walls out there, and we can have communication here. So we got a lot of things in this one. It's not only Actor.
Thank you, Jacob. And of course, Jacob, that is the considerations that you as a customer need to take. But if you are only looking for and ensuring your AX application, it can make sense to just buy a share on an express route from a third-party supplier. So that's just so you can keep the cost down, because of course an implementation is expensive. So customers looking at the value of the money here. So this is just to include you that it is not a necessity that you have your own express route. But if you are based in China, we will advise it for you.
I have one, sorry, last one, I promise. Just for everybody to know here, maybe somebody has got sites in China here. What we actually did during the startup
The microphone, maybe. Yeah.
We had our, I speak loud anyway, so we had our test system was placed in Hong Kong. So throughout summer of last year up until the autumn, we actually ran out of Hong Kong because Hong Kong was accessible both from Denmark, that was the first site, and from China. So we were perfectly all right with that. Chile would not be able to access from Hong Kong, but we knew that's only a temporary solution. So only just before go live did we actually deploy the US East Coast legislation. Just for everybody to know here, and we have actually, with the help of Ulrike in Texas and things, been moving around these test systems just to try to test out what is best Singapore, Europe, Hong Kong, and US.
And that's actually an important note to notice here is that we actually can use the agility of the product to deploy multiple test instances. So even though we took the worst case, the worst placement of the data center, we had of course the best deployed as well, having it shut down, waiting for if we had an issue with during a testing, and then we can power it up. So we have this kind of agility in the product. So you can.
Last commercial, which is important if you want to convince your CFO to buy something. Ulrike and I traveled to China one time with the CFO of MCI, and Ulrike said before we bought it in Denmark, said I just ordered the deployment in Hong Kong, and then we arrived in Hong Kong. Yes, it's up and running here. So if you ever want to convince the CFO that he's bought something agile, then this is of course the way.
Yeah.
In the past, he's been used to buying hardware, waiting for that, doing all kinds of deployment workshops with the pricing workshops with the partners, and getting it all up and running. So no, we boarded the plane, we landed, and up and running in a taxi in China. That
Great story. Great example.
Absolutely, absolutely. Also for express route, if you can avoid buying it, if there is no need to buy it, don't buy it because, as we said, it's very expensive. It's not simple. If you decided that you have to buy it and there is no other way out, we have a link here, and that's pretty much on MSD and explains how you can buy it, different partners that you can connect to. That's something X doesn't have any deals with this express route. It's pure Azure, so you'll have to go through the Azure route, find an Azure partner or another partner who can actually connect you through the express route to one of our nearest data centers. So the link here is also within the presentation itself.
Yes. And let's just continue with the environmental strategy, because what we did face was that Microsoft has changed the sure step model a little, meaning that we will only be provided with certain environments. And also they introduced the tier level of the environments. So we need to map that to something that we do understand, which was the 2012 implementation strategy, because that is what all our organization knows about. So is it your mic? No, okay, super. So we were faced by that challenge, and is it you or is it me? Oh, maybe I should move this, sorry. So the first task we had was to determine which kind of environments we need to purchase. Of course, we will get something from Microsoft when we purchase the license, but in the beginning, when you do an onboarding of a customer, you need, as a partner, to be able to deliver at least a demo environment to show you the sneak preview of the application itself. And you need to answer the questions the customer will have in relation to the environments. So we had these kind of questions: how many extra environments do we need to purchase? How do I manage my environments? Now we have heard that production system has been removed from your control. So we had all these kind of questions.
Just to provide some from Microsoft perspective, who is aware about the difference between one box and high availability? Could you raise your hands? Some people, yes. So that's a very important difference. That's the first thing you need to know and understand about new environments. That there are two very different topologies. There is one box, which is literally everything is on the same box, including your SQL server, your Visual Studio, etc. And then high availability. That topology is very different. It does not use SQL 2016. It uses Azure SQL, and there is a difference between those two. So whatever tests you might have done on your demo, dev, build environments, the same tests, they may not be as applicable later when you go into production and retest it again on production, sandbox, and UAT environments. So those two different topologies. As a partner, you cannot provision high availability topology. It's available only within customers' bot implementation project. So that's something for you to consider. So every time, and the later slides, when you talk about different environments, you have to note which environment, what kind of environment is it? Is it one box environment or high availability / sandbox environment that you are provisioning or you're budgeting for? So as Matt said, that's the question you have to ask, how many extra environments? Because as part of the project, if you a customer, we already provide you with some environments. The thing is, in your situation, it might not be enough. If you have a very complex project with multiple branches, with a staged deployments, then probably those environments that we provide you by default, it's not going to be enough, and you have to budget for extra environments to be bought. And we're going to talk about what was the MCI story and how many environments they have to buy extra.
Yes. So what we have here is the Microsoft chart of environments. And what you can see here in the tier level, we are talking about tier 1, tier 2, and sizing. That's the main difference. Of course, we have tier 4 and 5, but I would like to focus on tier 1 and tier 2, the one box and the high availability environments. What you can see is that we have a standard AX, and we have some green check marks on build, test, and production. And that is what all customers will receive when they purchase a license for Dynamics 365 operations. What we did on MCI was that we actually added, because we have some more complex projects, we understand that we had to do something about that, introducing some additional environments. And what we did introduce is the golden config. This is where we all our master data is born here. We want to have that environment locked down so we do not have accidental test access or something like this to destroy the data, because this will be our master, where we take the data with the entity copy feature, or we can take a database copy if we want to take the configuration and bring that to life loaded with the open models as we used to do on implementations. Then we did a lot of other environments pre-prod. I have included a simplified AX environmental visual drawing here at the next page. I'm not sure if you want to say something about this, Ken.
The question depends on the size of your environment. So this is just a sample. But this is a sample you have to consider right at the start of the project and decide what size of environment you have. Who is responsible for what, whether or not it's the customer or the partner will host certain environments like extra build environments, extra development environments, and decide which of the column your particular project belongs to. Mm-hmm.
So what we did, we mapped it to Visio because technicians tend to like that. So what we did here is that we showed you the environments that we have in place for MCI. We have simplified it for the sake of understanding here. But what we actually do see here is that we have the build box, which is the implementation project box. We have a star on the implementation here. It's IP star, means that it is included in your standard subscription. Then we have the test system, which is here meant as pre-live, because this is where we validate that the technical deployment of the solution can be done, and that is what Microsoft requires to bring that into production. So we call that pre-live. You can call it test if you want to, but it's just to highlight here that we have additional test systems before we do a golden drop for the production system. So IP star means that this is included in your implementation project. We have as well the SAX customer, the SAS project here, which is the customer project. It's run under your own Azure subscription, and it's not included in your Microsoft implementation project. And the reason why we introduced this is because we want to have some agility on the commitment of environments. If you are a customer purchasing environments under an EA agreement, you will be stuck on the environments until your anniversary period of your EA agreement. Meaning that if we request a test system we may use it for 2 weeks and want to get rid of it, if we have not a purpose for it, we need to pay for it until the anniversary date. So to put in the agility to be able to deploy stuff and do it on behalf and when the project needs it, we introduced the subscription AX project, meaning that we will purchase your own Azure subscription. You will sign up for that commitment, create an additional LCS project, and link that to that subscription. What we do then purchase under the implementation project is the golden configuration, because that makes perfect sense. Then we can take advantage of all Microsoft technologies to do the copies of the databases. So we do not need a technician to do the kind of stuff. We can actually just order it from the framework of LCS, meaning a lot for project managers, as well for Jacob when he wants to order a test deployment of a new test system. He can actually just say, I want production back in my test system. I want copy my configuration environment to my production environment or test system if I will test something. Sorry. So this is the simplified high-level topology of the project. We have a smoke box here, which is a one box where we do a lot of these kind of deployments. When we have a deployable package, we want to test that it works. And in Columbus, we have done the split that the TSA, the build manager, is doing the build, doing the first test on his build box. And of course, he wants to test it on a separate environment. And then he does that to a smoke environment to ensure that it technically can be working. When that process has been approved, he will take the deployable package and put it up through LCS. And then we have another person who actually will take that deployable package to replicate what Microsoft is doing when we do a deployable package to ensure that it will be working on the system. So we do not want to have the same developer who can do the small tricks to get it all working. We want to have a separate person to ensure the quality of the product. So yeah, what we have at the bottom here is the DEV boxes, and that is the intake of code. You can have additional DEV boxes, and you can place it around your own Azure data center or on-premise if you like. We will come back to that later. So what we will try to show you on the previous presentation is what to have on the implementation project.
Question? Would you always consider the code and blocks in that chart?
That's the config environment at the top. So that's the golden config. And the reason why we have all the arrows on, I can talk a little about these. What we have here is the red arrows is the code deployment to the boxes, and the black arrows is the configuration release. Meaning that if we do a database and have all the configuration done for all the entities, want to bring that live, this is the way it goes. We of course will test it in the test system first with the configuration, and then move it when we are live, going live to the production system directly.
Does that mean MCM bought 3 additional environments?
Yeah, they did. Because they had 3 branches, and we want to be on a separate phase on all the projects. We not want to be behind because Chile was not ready. We want to be ready in China. So therefore, we bring in some more boxes.
I would say on a very, very reasonable monthly subscription.
Yeah.
So for me, it's just a practical approach. It doesn't mean anything for me to buy that or gave us a lot of freedom in terms of being able to.
Agree. So
your dev box 3, that's because you're running different branches.
Yeah.
If there was going to the main branch, you probably would have decided going into build.
exactly.
Also remember that after you go live, you may need, if you continue developing, you may want at least keep one of the sandbox environments be in sync with your production for later for debugging, for troubleshooting, to have exactly the same version of the code that's in currently, and data of course, that is currently in your production. As you know, currently you cannot debug directly in production, so having another extra production-like environment is very important. So what we're going to talk about is later during troubleshooting section. Question?
Do you have a separate data migration environment, or like which environment do you use for data migration?
Actually, we used maybe Ulrich will elaborate, but we use the configuration environment to take in the data. Is that not true?
For a while.
What?
For a while.
For a while.
Yeah.
So we started to do a master configuration of config, and then we moved that because it was a security environment into production. Before we was not live, so we could actually use production, and there we loaded master data. For a while, we started due to availability of production to actually load it into config, but we would have liked to put it into our production before we went live.
I think the polite question from me is, of course, that nowadays I would expect copy configs to work out of the box. But when we were early birds, but we had a lot of troubles with moving data between environments. So at some stage, I think we just decided to say, okay, we do it the old-fashioned way, and we load data in live.
With a database copy.
Yeah. So initially, data was loaded in copy config, like in config, and every time we wanted to do a test, we took a snapshot of the config database and put that on our test environment, and then we tested the data. But once the first site was live, basically it became the old-fashioned way, what I've been used to in previous versions of Access, say we load into live and then that site goes on.
before you go live, it's totally fine to use database backup and restore to move data between the environments. But as Jakob said, after you are live, obviously it's not an option anymore. And then you have to use data entities and data import-export framework for your next go lives to move data around from our gold environment back into your live system. So, but for that, of course, please ensure you have all the entities ready and working and tested before you attempt this, of course.
And also one of the things that we did test by using the production system to load master data was actually that all the technology around the Office plugin and add-ins were working. So that was also nice because we had a lot of trouble with the federation about taking data in with a federated account. So yeah.
And also to do the backup and restore from config to production, you need to be on a tier 2. So I mean, the previous slide it calls out tier 1.
Yeah.
So I mean, did you start with tier 2 or did you?
We did start with tier 2 to understand because we understand that there was a difference. The problem with having a tier 1 is that you have the SQL. And you need to bring that as a backpack to your SQL on Asia, and that was a problem in the beginning. It has improved a lot. Tarek Bell has done a lot of to improve that product. But I will still do a project where we advise for a tier 2, because then we have the option to be safe on a database copy for the first entity, because we really want not to have technical issues to the later project when the customer is thinking that it is just a first service. Yep.
It's a better option. It's cost a little bit more.
Exactly. And then you can bring it up to the customer and say, do we want to have the risk? Or do you want to pay a little extra? And as Jakob says, it's not that expensive to have the tier 2 environments. And I also do and think that data on the SQL on Asia is better to have there than doing a backpack transferring a SQL on-premise to a SQL on Asia.
And it's closer to your production, so you don't have that extra risk of the conversion. Still, even people think that SQL 2016, which is on tier 1 on the one box, and Azure SQL are the same. But in fact, they're not. That's a very important difference. And different performance, different allowed operations. So closer you are testing to the production, and closer your data and gold integration leads to production, of course, it's better for the risk story.
Just one comment. So actually, we calculated briefly the cost, the added cost of two environment versus one box. It's only the difference that we need one backpack of. I mean, the effort it takes for Mass to upgrade the data from SQL 2016 to SQL on Azure, if you do that once a month, it's cheaper than everything. So we did that a lot.
Yeah.
We did this project, so it was a very simple calculation.
And the reason why we talk about the tier 1 is because that is actually what Fast Track has been recommending. The Dynamics Fast Track project has been recommending this. So that's the reason why we talk about it, because we think it's important. Yes. So this is, I think we will skip this slide here. It's just, I will show you what we have on the implementation project and what we have on the customer project, because we have two different projects. And also which additional Azure service you need to purchase to ensure that you are all set for your Dynamics implementation. What we have on the implementation project, you can see when you purchase the license for the product, you will get an implementation project. The first thing we do is that we rename it to the customer name implementation project. What we had on that project is the production system, the test and additional sandboxes, because we want to have the 2-tier. And then we had the DEV build as well, as Kirill was explaining, to ensure we can connect to a SQL on Azure database, do debugging. So this was quite important to have at least one DEV box there to ensure that we can do debugging. So I've just made a general slide here. What we do, it's all the environments listed, and it's just some additional advisory on that. What we have on the customer project was that we actually added additional build and dev boxes. And the reason why we did that is because we were branching out in 3 branches, and we know that that will not be a permanent solution. So it was just easier for us to take environments up and remove them. And if we want to test an ISV to ensure that that software is applicable for our solution, it's also easier just to deploy a box, test with the ISV. If it fails, delete it. If it's successful, do a test on it, and then plan for the merge. Because we really not want to destroy the branching by implementing ISVs on a temporary basis. We really want to test it before we implement in the code base.
And for that, you will need your own Azure subscription. So for the implementation project, that you buy from us, and it's hosted within our subscription, Microsoft subscription, and you buy, but for this one, you need your own subscription.
Yes. What we also do see customers like about that solution is that if we have several entities like we had in MCI, we could actually split up the cost, because reporting on cost on Azure is sometimes difficult, especially if you have a lot of services. So if you do a subscription for each entity, you will have all the costs based on that, and then you can rebuild it to that entity instead of doing a lot of back office work to ensure what is paid, going to pay what not. So this is also a clever move, we think, that we can actually have. If you have the Chile entity, they can have their own subscription with their own project, and then we can have a Chinese project where we have their own subscription and their own billing. So that's just for the sake of easiness here. What else do you need to purchase when you start these projects here? Is that you probably will need a blob storage because then it's in the cloud. So you might need to migrate files to the Azure blob storage to ensure that AI can actually consume them. You need to buy additional storage accounts if you want to, of course, also store files. And then you will, at the moment, need a virtual machine for the warehouse portal. It has actually been released in the newest version. I'm not sure if it's update 3, update 4, that you can run it as a service directly from AX. But on MCI case, we need to have an additional VM taking care of delivering the same warehouse portal as we did in 2012, just connecting to Dynamics 365 operations. Only for now. The update will solve that problem. So, what we also purchased from Asia, which is not on the slide, is that you will need, if you have a Visual Studio, you need to add additional users if your developers are not having a MSDN subscription. You will need to purchase that. You can either rent it for a month, or you can purchase it for a year, or you can purchase an entire subscription. That is based and built out of Azure. What we also purchase is stakeholders license to the LCS project to ensure that project managers and so on can report on the code base. So, yes. Then we have the solution development, and what we focused a lot on was the development story, because we had known that this has changed a lot. We do not have only one development environment. We have several. So what we started out with was the developer instructions. We did understand what Microsoft was meaning about overlaying is dead. So we had a lot of qualification of our developers to understand that we do not allow overlaying, and that has actually been quite good in the project. So we made this how to use the DEV10, how to ensure that you are linked to the workspace and the VSTS solution correctly. So we ensure that we have all the changelog on the modification done. This is the changement. And as I said before, the rules of engagement for the developers. We underlined several times that overlaying is not possible, and we got a lot of fight about that. But actually, by taking that pain at the beginning, helped our project a lot. So we are not afraid when we do these kind of upgrades, because if there is any overlaying, it's really minimum, and it's easier for us to then manage. And we have the same engagement rules for ISVs and for third-party developers, so it makes a lot of sense. So as long as you focus on that, you should not be so afraid about Microsoft shutting down the platform and removing the overlaying functionality on the platform itself. So, yes?
One more thing you forgot. You actually had some fights with developers about also remembering data estimates.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the learning things.
Exactly. And we have that as on an ISV slide. What is important to mention for your third-party developers and ISVs as well is that you will like to have data entities, because that is what you use for the product. So if an ISV is not providing data entities for that product, you will have a problem importing and exporting data on their behalf.
One thing important to remember for your developers to define your policies and structures from the very beginning. Specifically new things for us in this project. Right now, we really want you to use Visual Studio Team Services. Use source control. Before, in the previous versions, it was very common when you can import XPO right into production, do similar things. Who didn't do this, right? But nowadays, we really want be very structured. We'd like you to use Visual Studio Team Services. We'd like to have regular builds, ideally automated build. And sooner you do it on your implementation project, better it's going to be and better value you will get out of all automated tools and structured approach as Microsoft recommend.
Just to clarify, did you use VS for issue management as well, or just?
Yes, we did that as well, yeah. And we used the functionality of the client to upload the test case to understand what was going on in the client. So, yeah, we did that. Then we talked about the code base and release management and all what I talked about, how delivering the code. That's also changed. We cannot take an XPO, as Kirill is saying, and put that into a test system. We actually need to make a package. So that is quite important for developers to understand how we do this kind of stuff. And at least also we set up the release management on, actually we had a dedicated resource being build administrator, but also release manager technically release manager. We did introduce the project manager as a functional release manager. It can be delegated to the functional architect if you like, but it's up to you to do the split on this because it is a huge task actually. So, yeah, the next slide, where we're going to show how code is coming into the system. What we have here at the bottom is the DEV boxes, this symbolizing a DEV machine. This is developer 1, this is developer 2. He do some kind of stuff here. He take the metadata from the build. Actually, we should have BSTS in line here, but it's just so complex to have all this on the same slide. But we have the build box here, which has representing the metadata. And what developers do is that they do check out and do a modification, and then check it in again, and branching it on the branch here. The build administrator will take the application snippet or changes to the application, merge that into an iteration, and then we can deliver the iteration from that build box. So this is just the functional, or not the development design of the release. So all developers is delivering to the same build administrator. So he's a busy guy here. When we have developers working all day long, putting in all the check-ins here, when they are all finalized, he needs to do the merge of all that. And when he has done all these kind of releases, he can deliver it to the UAT system if that is needed. And if we have more branches as we had on the MCI project, he can put it onto different projects here. But not projects, different environments. So if day one he do something for Chile, he can put that in test 2. And if he do something else for China, he can put that in the traditional UAT test system because that was the first go live. And of course, when all these modifications has been approved, it can be delivered to the production system. And it is important to notice that Microsoft will not accept any deployable package, meaning the golden deployment, until it has been successfully through LCS being deployed onto a test system. If it has not been deployed on the test system, they will never intake it. That's their quality assurance of the product, that it actually can be deployed on a 2-tier environment. So this is quite important to understand. And then we have the pre-prod environment here, which is our debugging box. We did understand that when we do not have access for the production system, it is important that we can be on production-like data to understand what's going on in the application, being supportable for Microsoft if they had an issue with the production system. And we use the pre-live environment for this purpose to ensure that we have the access to data and that we can debug on that data. What we also use it for is that because we do not have access for production, we want to be 100% sure that no data will affect our deployment. And what we do before each release is that we order a copy of production to the pre-live environment, do whatever all the steps Microsoft will do with LCS to deploy it, ensure it works, mark it as a golden config, and throw it up to Microsoft, order the service window.
So you do your UAT in the UAT and training environment.
Yes.
And then you'll deploy to this pre-live environment. Will you do some UAT again there before you actually?
This is actually a good question. This is where we would like to have all the automatic testing done, because we do a lot of stuff in that environment to ensure what we normally call scratch the surface, because that's what we have time for. The automatic testing and load testing is definitely what we would like to improve the project with. But because we have all these technical issues with onboarding the TAP program, we do not manage to finalize all the test scripts. But you have the option to do that in the client, taking on the task recordings and bring that in as test script. And we plan to put that in the pre-lab environment.
It's on ours.
Yeah, you probably...
I had it on my roadmap here before this summer, before July. I'm not really looking because we go through update 3 and update 4 also.
Yeah.
But this is something that is very, very high on our agenda. We are, like many other customers, for good and for worse, we are loud shelters. Really loud shelters.
And that's not uncommon for our customers. So actually on other customer projects, we have the load test done and implemented on the pre-lab environment.
So right now you're really just validating deployment there.
Yes. And that's also important to notice that that is what Microsoft requires, and that's of course that's what we accommodate. But I agree with you that putting in the test scripts will definitely raise the quality of the delivery.
You could argue you've already done it to the tier 2 environment UAT, but you haven't done it where your real data line
No.
lives.
Mm-hmm. But actually just to improve that process, we actually also do take production copies to the test system. So they will be quite close. Of course, you need to decide if you want to update it daily or weekly or monthly. So this is up to you as a customer and partner to understand which kind of data you need to have when you do your testing.
Those updates, they're done automatically. You do them through LCS, so you don't have to call anybody. Of course, you don't have access to production system, but via LCS you can request that update to be done to any of your UAT systems, sandbox systems. Of course, moving later data into development environment, it's more tricky because, again, it's a different type of SQL server. But we've seen a few customers who are also moving the data into development environment, in some cases to enable their developers to develop on the latest copy of the data if security allows.
Yeah, and maybe I can say that from a commercial point of view again, if sitting in my chair, that's probably I'm the one that are ordering the data refresh, and we do for test 1 we do it on a daily basis, for test 2 we do it on a weekly basis, and I order this in LCS, I request this service, and it's done. And for me, that really then is the first example of a good transparent service where I have no clue what happens behind. It seems to be automated, and I'm totally happy with the result. Right? That's really a beautiful process. I would have had to employ my own technicians before
To do that.
kind of stuff.
Now you can do it in your
It's
car.
gone. It's
Yeah.
gone.
Question?
Just Christian, would you really do your automated test in pre-prod rather than in build? Just think like with an automated test, you need to have your before and after to know what's changed. So would you template to start with?
Actually, this one I maybe answer because I would like to highlight one important thing, that the build environment, you never touch it. Build environment, it's a special environment that's done only for the purpose of build. That's used by our Visual Studio Team Services build machine and build agents in order to actually produce deployable package. So technically, this environment for you is off limits.
But it's part of build isn't one of the options to restore a database from a backup and have it then
No,
automated.
not in the build. The build system is different because we have a SQL in the stomach of the system with one box, one tier. We do not have SQL in Asia on that one. So we have a problem there. And what we do is that we backpack data on a regular basis, but it's not so easy as if we just order a database, restore from production to a pre-prod, because then Jacob can do it. If we want to do it on a build environment, we need to do a backpack, do all the conversion, put it on the build box, and bring it all up, and it takes some time still to do that.
As part of a build, because right now we do a lot of investment into automated build, and we do have an option to restore a database there. And also we work on more tools there, of course, to improve automated testing story as part of the build itself. So that's something in the pipeline. But again, it's a different topology from your production environment. So having it on the real data, it's a bit complicated at the moment.
I think we should speed a little up. So what is involved in the code management here is, of course, the VSTS as we just talked about, because that's the change management. This is where we receive all the code snippets, and that's also where we keep the code base. This is also where we include the deliveries from 2increase and all the other ISVs to ensure when we do a dev box deployment that we have all the software on that same box to ensure that we can also code on that. What we also do is the Microsoft application hotfixes is, of course, also included in the branch when they have been successfully tested to ensure that the application can be updated. And what we also use it for is, as Kirill is saying, the automated build. So you should see the build environment as an engine. This is what you feed the beast with all the code snippets, and then we'll do all the compilation and all the packaging of the software in a deployable package. What we also talked about in development is the extensions versus customizations. We really encourage our developers to do extensions. So this is also an important thing to do, and that's also what you need to do if you do not do your all layering. We talk about the software packages that we do provide. We have several. You need to make a strategy on how to present your application in a way so the customer can understand which is in the application, which is not in the application, because you could have a deployment of software to a test system which is not the same as on another test system as we had in MCI. So we did to make up an understandable way of documenting that, and that was done by iterations. So we can tell you iteration number 43 is then deployed to this environment, and we have a list of that, and then we will of course make the change log on what was included in that code base. What we also talked about a lot is the dev box topology to choose from. Microsoft is offering these three options here. I tend to use the matrix analogy on this one here. You can take either the blue, the green, or the red pill. The first option is just to purchase as an add-on on your subscription, so it will be included in your implementation project. This is the first here. What you can also do is that if you want to have a dev box on your own machine, you can actually just download a VHD, put it on your laptop if you have a powerful laptop, and then take your dev box around with you. You can still connect to all the VHDs and take your brands out, have the source code on your box, do your stuff, and take it in. But you can also purchase as a cloud-hosted environment on your own subscription. So Maersk did purchase both of these. They had their own deployment, actually based on Columbus, because we want to bring our own dev box for developers, having the toolkit ourselves, not relying on customer to deliver a box for us. But you can also take the VHD and put that on your own hardware if you have hardware investments you need to take advantage of. So I'm not sure I will talk so much about it, but it is just you should be aware of there is 3 solutions for this.
Yes, the question. So I downloaded the VHD and there's a 60-day subscription. So as a developer, how do I get around that? Do I pick one of the other options so I don't have to refresh every time?
Maybe I should repeat the question. The question is about the license for Visual Studio, isn't it?
So I downloaded the VHD and that has the whole environment.
Mm-hmm.
Where I can do all my work, development and whatnot. There's a little counter that says 60 days and every day passes and at some point it's going to expire. But we not supposed to download.
That's the ream counter. Okay, so it's the entire machine, the Windows machine in the VHD is having a counter saying that it will be suspended. I'm not sure if I should say that, but what we do is that we rearm it. You can do that several times for a machine. So you can do as on a traditional Windows server, you can rearm it and get another period of 180 days. That is actually what we do for development. In relation to the Visual Studio license, you need to have your license, even though it is VHD that you have downloaded, you need to have a Visual Studio Online account to ensure you can do development. But I think you probably will have that.
Also consider that right now we really want our customers and partners to stay as current as possible, and we do releases quite often. We really like releasing new software. You see, we have update 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So we do release new versions of those VHDs quite often, and that's one of the reasons for you also to move to the latest version and update to the latest VHD.
It depends. The customer can bring the license for you if they want to have you on their corporate network with their accounts and their user credentials. They will bring the license, and if you have it as a partner yourself, you will need to purchase that. And if you do not do a lot of development, you can think about purchasing it by month. And if you do a lot of Dynamics 365 operations development, you can purchase for a year. But that's also based on the Asia subscription, so you can purchase it out from that. The easiest thing is to have an MSDN subscription, but that is, of course, also the most expensive one. What did we do to ISVs? We talked a lot with the ISVs because that was all whole new to the business here on bringing the codes. We had seen issues with how to get the software in because we want to have developers having the ISVs as well when they do development. We had a lot of things going on with the license handling. We need to include a process to ensure that we can have a license deployed and synchronized before we do the deployment of the ISV stuff. And also we had the ISV impact when we do the automatic testing. We need to ensure that when we do the test scripts, that we are on a code base that has the ISV installed, otherwise we cannot do the test scripts. And then we have a tip, ensure modification and ISV delivers entities, and that was Jacob's main approach here. We need to have entities on all the software in our system because that's really the key of Dynamics 365 operations. What did we do when we received software from ISVs? Is that we actually upload them to the asset library of LCS. And this is similar, if I should just translate it to what we know, is that it is the installation directory. As if we were doing installation of 2012, we have a repository where we have all the software bits for the solution. And LCS is a perfect place to have that. We have the option to store the ISVs. You can see we also store our iterations here from MCI, but we can also put in ISV codes. So if you want to do a test with only the ISV, you can actually go in and say, I want to deploy a test system, and select the ISV and click deploy, and then you will be able to receive a system with successfully deployed ISV solutions. And that is actually quite a neat advantage of what we did in the past. Deployment. this is the deployment of the implementation project. And what you should keep in mind here is that when you will receive the different environments when you are doing onboarding, what you will have during onboarding is the sandbox. This is the test system which we will be deploying the first golden application to, approving that it works and put it into production. You will get that instantly when you do when you sign the customer up for this. You need to do some steps to ensure you can have a build environment, meaning that you need to do some VSTS setups for the project to ensure that you can deploy a successful build box, so you can have the automatic build and agents deployed on your behalf. So that is quite important to you to understand. And then the production system is when you are ready. So that is a wide phrase. Normally we see that 2 months before go live, Microsoft accept the solution, saying yes, you can go live with this solution. And then you will have the option to do configuration of the production system. It is important to understand that it is up to either the customer or the partner to go into the project and click configure. Nobody does it for you. You will just have the option to select it, click configure, and then you will select your solution based on which version you would like to run, which ISV should be included, and all the other stuff we need to fill in. The VSTS, you want probably to have it. If you have an existing VSTS, you will link to that one. Maybe you have created one solely for that customer, you will use that one, of course. So, And I have just made a list of all the questions that I normally get when we do this. All customers asking how to receive the implementation project. That is quite simple. Purchase a license. You will need to purchase the minimum amount of license. I'm not sure if it's still 20.
At the moment, yes.
Yeah. So you need to purchase 20 enterprise users for your application to ensure you have the implementation project. When you have purchased that license through your CSP or your enterprise agreement dealer, the law, you will receive an activation email, and that is step one. And the reason why I outline this is because when we're being at a partner saying, customer, please purchase that license, we probably will not sell the license ourselves. They can have a different EA. They could have a different CSP. So we are not in control. We just advise on what to purchase. They go to their supplier saying, we want to purchase this license. They do that. The supplier is just signing off, giving them the license, and then we're stuck because we need to have an activation email. And we have in Columbus done that we tell the LAR or the CSP that they should ensure who will receive the email, because the only option Microsoft has is that they can resend the email. So if we cannot find it, they can resend it. And when we did this project, we was actually not able to understand or get the knowledge from Microsoft about which mail address it will be sent to. So it is important that we know exactly where that email is going. And the best way to place that responsibility is on the people doing the sales. So people doing sales must tell us where the email is going. Sorry. What you also need to do is that you need to set up milestones on the LCS project. This is symbolized at the bottom here. So even though that you have set up your VSTS solution, you still need to tell LCS when you plan to do analysis, design and development, test, and deploy and operate. Microsoft used these 4 dates, and there are 3 dates that's quite important to fill that in. And you're not allowed to, I should probably say that, you're not allowed to put in a go-live date in advance of your real go-live, because you want to have the production. You need to be really precise about when you're going live with your system.
Who has ever seen or tried to work with implementation project within LCS methodology? Who hasn't tried? So our UI is far from being perfect, but we are working on it. So we are very prescriptive in implementation project. As Matt said, you cannot deploy production server unless you checked all the checkboxes when necessary, unless you did all the estimates, unless you already filled in all the gaps and they filled in all the milestones within the project itself. We are, as Microsoft, becoming very prescriptive, and implementation project, we're going to guide your implementation to the very end, and we won't provision production environment until you completed all the prerequisites required in the implementation project. It's something also to remember and plan for.
Maybe you can do the Microsoft stuff about the test and automatic testing. What is your goal and plans for this skill?
I won't go into the plans because we are running out of time. Just want to say that at the moment we have a really good focus on automated testing. That's our goal eventually, for the customers to have a very good story for automated testing. Right now you can record task guides and you can convert those task guides into automated tests and then execute them as part of your automated build. So the story is already there. There are things here and there that we are working on, but if you have a chance to try out automated testing, check out more information during the conference. That's something definitely going to save your time long term and improve reliability of your project. Otherwise, of course, typical testing, UAT testing, performance testing, benchmarking is still there, and you still have to go through those steps before you are ready to implement and deploy your production system.
How many scripts do you have?
We don't publish those scripts for test automation.
No, just for this project. How many scripts?
So for this project, there was no automated testing done. All testing was done manually. Matt can talk more about it.
And the reason why we selected that was because the product was not so ready for the automated testing. But on other projects, we do plan to have at least 5 or 10 test scripts on each stream, meaning that if you have a finance track, we need to have at least 5 or 10, depending on the business. But that's something we put into to the scope of the project when we do onboarding.
We partly use rapid testing used to report our processes, report requirements, and actually run it through the entire project and process. We are not doing it to the extent we should to report test results and test outcomes in that slide. So it's definitely room for improvement, but we use it and we have some test performance there, but a small piece of the total project.
But it's definitely one of our key focus areas to ensure that we can supply this as a value for a customer. And what we have already learned is that you should group it in small unified groups. You should not make extensive test scripts. You need to do small script tests, make 10 tests to ensure your process instead of just making one, because then you have huge bits of code and it will be difficult to maintain. It's easier for a developer to understand small snippets of what's going on in the process. So how do we do deployment of the code? We use LCS, as we have been talking a lot about. We do deploy the customer solution with the help of the customer. So actually, the customer, if they want to have that responsibility, they can update their own test system, as Jacob has told before. We do deployment into sandboxes. This is the smoke test that we do test that the functionally and technically stuff is working when we do deployments. Then we have the request in deployment into production, and that's also important to understand that we request a production deployment through Microsoft. We do that through LCS, and we should tell them about when we will like to have the downtime period and also how long time it should take. Microsoft is coming with a standard, and we can of course accept that, but sometimes we can improve on doing stuff faster and easily. So this is definitely where Microsoft is improving. The time for doing deployment is definitely going down. So this is also where we do all the maintenance of the service windows to ensure the customer understands what we are doing to their system. And they have all the change logs. So everything we requested from Microsoft on a production system will be on a change log. And that's quite neat, because we can then not just call Kirill, say do this, Kirill, because it's not an option. We need to do it with a request to ensure that the customer can see what's going on, and we have all the change log on everything. So
one thing here, so there is actually a very common fear from customers that right now, since everything is production, locked down, so you cannot anymore import an XPO file right into production to fix an issue there. You have to request a deployment into production through OLCS in the typical process, as you would do with any other thing, even in case of a critical issue there. So, and also but still our request time is pretty fast. Our DSC team, we have a special team that's dedicated to deployment into production. Just one request from them, and of course give a heads up, so you don't overwhelm them and they know what's coming if you can. So that's one thing. Otherwise, it's been a pretty good experience so far, and there was not too many problems with customer not being able to go directly into production and change code there or change data there. So that's actually worked pretty fine for MCI, for this customer.
We might tend to speed a little up here, so I'll just go briefly through the next slides. The data import-export feature, we use that for mainly copying the configuration from the master data environment until the production system. We loaded all the open orders and all the master data stuff through that entity. And that is actually quite a neat feature, and you have already all seen that we can use Excel as our main intake of data to the Dynamics application. And again, ensure that modifications and ISVs include the entities. So The BI story, it is delivered from Proactive. I'll just briefly go through that. What we do tend to tell customers that Power BI, that is what they know about. This is just one of the components for this. We need to ensure that they can see the data lake as an engine for all their data. And what we do is that we tell the Lego story here, that BI is one of the bricks, but you need to have additional components to ensure that you can take data out of your existing applications. And actually, we had an 09 customer onboarding this, the Dynamics 365 operation projects, which would like to have the historical data presented in Power BI. And what we do offer them is that we will grab the data from their existing database when we do a freeze on that, and present that in a BI desktop included in Dynamics 365 operations to make a seamless integration. So this is our story about BI. How it works on MCI is that we have Dynamics 365, which is pushing data to an SQL server, traditional setup, where we have some automation done on Asia to ensure that cubes are updated when we have new data. That is done through the Asia analysis services. So what we have seen here is that cubes are updated in real time because we don't care. We have SQL as a service. So we just have Asia to take all the impact on this one. And then the users can consume the data through their Excel, their Power BI desktop, or powerbi.com. So this is the approach we have done. Make it simple, and actually it does work quite neat. So important to know about data is that data entity, that is where you have the data. And data entity is just presenting the data in a way that we can understand as non-developers to ensure that we can consume data. And the way we do export all the jobs is with traditional AX batch jobs to ensure that we have filled in the data to be able to consume it through Power BI. We have included one of the support experience slides here. Actually, there's a possibility to have the intake of the issue directly in the client. So if you do have an issue, you can just take that one in, have the business to do the super user advisory themselves. If they have an issue, they can publish that to the partner, and then we can intake the support case, as we are normally used to do on other previous implementations. If we had an issue that the partner cannot solve themselves, we can push it to the Microsoft support engine, of course, and do the same traditional escalation as we do in the past. So this is just a great slide showing where the responsibility is. Of course, Columbus is, or the partner is participating in the intake of support cases if the customer cannot do it yourself. So you can, of course, participate on the screen sharing session, helping, providing this information to the support engine.
Yes. From Microsoft side, so it's actually interesting to use it as an example, because here it's an example of partner and the customer and Microsoft working all together to solve troubleshooting cases. So even if you heard that it's all a software as a service, it's in fact, we all have to work here together in order to solve a problem. So we have the problem can come from two ways. Either it comes from the end user having some issues, then they're being reported to a customer representative who reports them to a partner who opens a support case via LCS, and then Microsoft troubleshoot issues if they're related to the Dynamics 365 operations. We have another route. We also, from our side, we do a lot of monitoring, proactive monitoring of what's happening using our telemetry. So those cases, sometimes we see that something is wrong from within Microsoft, then we might even solve the case ourselves if we know what is going on there. But it's pretty much both, but still, some cases will require the partner, will require the customer, because it might be related to your customizations. So you have to remember and budget and already test your support story from within the customer and the partner themselves.
And to translate.
One of my last questions. Will I get to a stage where I will be notified by you or my partner automatically that you are now seeing a service and that I don't have to hit it from where myself?
In the ideal world, you won't even have notification, will solve it for you without even notifying you. That would be an ideal world. That's where we are trying to get to. But right now, yes, it's a critical case, and we know that it's happening. We will, of course, work together and will notify you. Yes. Yes?
Is there a support agreement where I can go directly to Microsoft and my partner?
There are multiple levels of support agreements. Depends on which country you are. There is typical support. There is a premier support agreement. I don't think we have a separate session on this one, but later we can sync up and we can provide you with more information on different levels of support agreements.
But I have a comment there. Because it's a good question. I'm facing the same as a customer. But what is it if I really want to bypass my party? How can Microsoft take full responsibility for the code and I speak some? And by the way, what's causing my service degradation? So I do understand the context here, but I really think this is something we should work on in the community to find a good solution for, to sort of set this responsibility straight. It is a troublesome for me from a commercial point of view that I'm buying, perception-wise at least, Dynamics 365 as a service from Microsoft. Yet I have to go to my partner to get up.
Questions are good. Very good question. Very good comment. Thank you.
So just to elaborate on what we had an issues with, because we had issues with the implementation, I will just try to highlight how we solve these kind of issues. What we did do is, when we do not have access for production, that we found out the way to do debugging, and that was by the database refresh from LCS, that we can actually take the pre-live environment and put a database copy on that, try to do the same steps. We do that on a daily basis, so it is not automated, but we request a lot of these refreshes to ensure that we always have recent data in the pre-live environment. In there, we do not do binary deployment, because if you have a binary deployment, you could, of course, not debug. So what we do is that we actually map the metadata, the source data, to that environment to ensure that we can have the transparency between the data and the code. We actually think that's quite a clever achievement to do this in this way. So this you should be aware about. Binary deployed box is source code, compiled source code, which you cannot debug. If you do a metadata deployment to that environment, you will be able to debug.
In general, one thing also to remember is that right now we have a lot of telemetry that's happening within the system. So technically we know what's happening, and it can really help us understand what is the actual performance problem, what is the technical problem. We have all the logs there available that are available to you as well through the LCS project telemetry, as well to our support engineers. So that's something that's been really helpful for this MCI project. So with that, I think we are running out of time. So guys, let's stay in touch. If you have any follow-up questions, we're going to be available both after the session and on our emails and LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with us. There was a session yesterday about the functional aspects of this implementation. Obviously, you can go back in time. So if you're interested more about the functional aspects, you may want to listen to the session in the recording. Please do fill in the surveys. We really appreciate all your feedback. And hopefully that was really helpful for you. If you are a new customer, if you're just starting your implementation, or a partner, hopefully this technical introduction, technical overview gave you highlights of all the problems you might face, and gave you some tips and pointers on how to solve them, how to approach them, and where to look for your solutions. Thank you very much, guys. Good luck with your implementation.